So one, I wanted to tell us that M&E plans development partners dependence. That's one thing, because and that is the fact that so for some of us that are here, that you might have been working with some international partners, let's categorize them as maybe some international private foundations, and you get grants from them. So if you're civil society, if you're working in the NGO space, you will find out that when you're writing proposals, they request for M&E plans. So some of them have this, they do have these templates which they share with everyone, and they say you should look at it as a guide if you've worked on European Union projects before, if you've worked on Commonwealth Foundation, if you've worked on Open Society Foundation, MacArthur Foundation. They have these templates in which you just need to fill in based on the scale, the scope, the size, the dynamics of the project you're trying to execute. So I wanted to say this clearly, so that we don't think like there's one M&E plan somewhere. I've come across several diverse M&E plans around the world. Then to also note that people call it different names. So there are different names based on who is giving you the templates. If it's an agency of Canada, he might call it another name. If it's an agency of the United Kingdom, he calls it another name. If it's an agency of the Netherlands, calls it another name. If it's a private foundation, some of the ones that I've mentioned, they call it different names. So, but I mean, M&E plans are common to all of them, and what is included in it. So I'm just going to focus on what is included in it, in an M&E plan. And like I said, my slide said how to cook in an M&E plan. So which then means, how do I put my M&E plan? I'm just going to create a template out of the blues, but we can do something and use a project to think about developing an M&E plan. And I'm going to do that. Our time is fast spent, but let me see what I can do. It can take, it can take 4 to 5 hours before you can say you develop a draft M&E, then before you share it with your colleagues and all that. So I'm just going to focus on what things that you will see in an M&E plan. And I'm going to use, so I will stop sharing, no more sharing again. I will share my screen back again. Thanks a lot once again. We have 44 participants at the moment. So I'm just going to be sharing my screen based on so let me try and share my screen. Okay, so and I'm just going to pick this out of the blue. So what you're seeing right on your screen are different projects. So I don't want to come up with something. So these are different projects that have been funded by a private foundation, the National Endowment for Democracy in Nigeria. You can check their sites. They are for several African countries where they put in their money to promote democracy in Africa. What I will just do is pick one of these, then use it to, so there's this EIE project. This is my local government projects. So I have a spreadsheet here. Take this out of here. So they said, so this project is meant to mobilize citizens to demand response. It's quite funny that this is the kind of project that now come okay, anyways, to mobilize citizens to demand responsive and accountable government at all levels. I'm just going to take this out. So promotes local governments' abilities to meet citizens' demand. That's another thing. I'm already trying to take out the objectives. They might call it the objectives. So the organization will educate. So let me take out the activities. Educate and mobilize activists. Come on, guys, if you do not, so let me just insert one row above. This is like an objective. I said like an objective, and these are the activities for this project: educate and mobilize civic activists. Is there anything to take out? Train officials on constitutional outreach and governance. The organization will support local activities, campaigns, and facilitate. Okay, so let's take out all the activities from here. Support local activities and campaigns. Taking out all the activities already. I hope I am still sharing my, okay, I'm still sharing my screen. And facilitate community engagement via radio, blah, 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 social media. Got it. Then, lastly, link local activists to national democratic reform campaigns, whatever that means. These are, so this is a project, so we can quickly, I can quickly talk about what an M&E plan entails, or what should be in an M&E plan for this. One thing to note is that from this, and I mean this, if you go to Ford Foundation, Open Society Fund, they have projects that have been written, projects that they are funding, like their grantees, they call it grantees database. You can take out, you can sieve out projects that people are doing in several countries, and I mean, do so many other research around it. One thing I wanted to say is that, and that is about proposal writing. If you're writing a proposal, and this is an added value to this conversation, if you're writing a proposal to submit to National Endowment for Democracy, especially if you know that you're doing great works in your country about strengthening democracy, this is the first place you need to come and see what kind of projects they are supporting, so that you can know how to develop your own activities, objectives, and or whatever. So it's important. It's also important so that you can know what other entities are doing in your country as it concerns strengthening democracy. And it then allows you to know who to partner with, because they're already doing that thing. And also makes you understand that some people are doing it already. So if it's the same strategy you're using, it might not interest the National Endowment for Democracy. So maybe you need to think about another strategy. Having said that, so let's go to so mobilize citizens. So this is normally how so in terms of frameworking, you have your results. So these are result statements. which some people call result chain. So which might start from your inputs. So results include inputs, activities, output, your outcome, and the impact. Or in another way, it might be in form of inputs, activities, outputs, immediate outcomes, intermediate outcomes. Then you have your long-term outcome, or what some people call impact. So results, those are results anyways, and I'm still going to come there. I'm just telling you these are some things that are common to all M&E plans. Some people call it result pathway, some people call it M&E framework. So I mean, the different ways people call it. So depending on the template. So results, you have indicators. So indicators means how you want to measure the result. What are you going to be using to measure the result? For example, in this case, when you say you want to mobilize citizens to demand responsive and accountable government at all levels, how are you going to measure that? What indicator are you going to use? Indicators can be numerical, it can be non-numerical. When you talk about non-numerical indicators, they are those that are that you can assign quality to. They are not quantitative. They are expressed in terms of testimony, expressed in terms of category teams, they are expressed in terms of cases, they are expressed in terms of evidences. So not in terms of, if you talk about numerical indicators, you then talk about average. They are expressed in terms of average, numbers, ratios, proportion. So in this case, you want to think about how would you know that your project is actually mobilizing citizens to demand response and accountable government. Some might say, as an example, evidence of government response to citizens' demand, evidences. So you can think about that I mean, that's an example of an indicator. So you have indicators, then you will then have data collection method. And what I'm showing you is just a basic data collection, a basic M&E plan. So data collection method. So I can insert one column before here, data collection source. And I'm going to explain this now. So when you say evidence of citizens, evidence of government response or government responding to citizens' demand as an indicator, you can go on and change that indicator to, okay, within a quarter or so. You want to tell us where you will collect that data from. Where would you collect it from? Where would you collect the evidences of government response to? Some people, you might narrow, it's good to narrow your indicators. I can say evidence of government response to freedom of information requests in a quarter. I've narrowed down that indicator so that it becomes more measurable for me. So you need to talk about the data collection source, like where are you going to get that data from? Which then means, oh, okay, you can think about, okay, maybe from news clips as a data source, maybe that is it. Data collection source might also be, I can also say it could also be the, maybe in your country, if there's an office for freedom of information, or that particular office where people are supposed to respond, where government entities are supposed to respond to FOIs. You can then call that your data collection source. Then the data collection method. So if the government entity, let me just put it here and say maybe government entity, for example. Don't forget, I use this as an example. I took this, Ctrl+C, I can put it here as the result that I'm looking out for, right? And I said evidence of FOI response. No, evidence of responses to FOI requests. And I've said here, government entity. Then data collection method then becomes like, what method am I going to use? The different data collection method. So before I move on, you see this data collection source. There are primary data collection source and there is secondary data collection source. Primary data collection source are sources that you collect yourself as an evaluator or maybe as the M&E officer. Those that you can physically get that are part of your project or program, people you can reach out to get information, especially if that information is part of your project. So we say it's primary data collection source, is within the scope of your program. But if you cannot collect that data within the scope of your program, is outside of the scope of your program, like for example, if it is that you want to go and look for a database where they normally put in FOI response by government entity, then it becomes a secondary source. So news clips that are not related to your program, that are outside of the program, and you want to use that, that is a secondary source. So I said government entity. It could be this could be primary. If in our project, as part of our activities, we have said that, I think they mentioned it somewhere here. Educate and promote local government abilities to meet citizen demands. I want to think that this project would also be doing maybe sensitization training for people in the local government. Let me leave it at the scope of this project because they say local government. So it means that they will train these local government officials to be responding. When they do that and they want to do data collections, I will refer it to as primary. If this source, those sources that are within their program, those people they've trained, they've taught how to respond, maybe through the FOI. So it becomes a primary source. Then data collection method can be quantitative. You can have quantitative data collection method and qualitative data collection methods. These you can say maybe, and if you talk about quantitative data collection methods, that is when you talk about, for example, if you're going to be doing a survey, developing a survey so you can administer a questionnaire, that is a principal quantitative data collection method. But the other ones, on the other end, there's qualitative data collection method. For example, you have individual interviews, you have focus group discussions, you have you could have panel workshops. These are qualitative data collection methods. In here, maybe you want to put individual interviews. So when you say individual interviews, what you're trying to say is that you are going to conduct individual interviews for government entities, for them to tell you or give you the evidence of their responses. One question that I already see in this interview will be, oh, okay, could you tell us about responses? Could you give us, Could you tell us about your response to citizens via the FOI in the last 3 months or in the last 6 months? So the person starts to talk, oh, we've responded to A, we've responded to B. Don't forget, you just need evidence. You just need them to say, well, you can then probe further in the interview and say, oh, can you give us examples of that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you just needed evidence. So individual interviews, then your data collection, I am going to pause in a minute. Data collection instrument, I think I've mentioned this before, then comes into play. Then I've already mentioned it, you have an individual interview guide. So that's your data collection instrument. I can make this instead of, let me try and wrap it a little bit so it makes a little bit of sense. This is my data collection plan just coming up. Like I said, what's included in it? Your results, indicators, data collection source, data collection method, data collection instruments. At times you can say when, you can then say when to collect data. So which makes you remember when you're supposed to collect data. Because don't forget, like your M&E plan is like a guide to your office as an M&E officer. So you might say maybe 4 months, 4 months into the program. If you like, you can say, okay, maybe 4 months after the first training, set of trainings for the local government officials. So that's when to collect data. And in having this, it guides the M&E office that, you know what, 4 months into the program, we need to develop an individual interview guide and conduct an individual interview for government entities that are involved in our program for us to know the evidence of responses to FOI requests in order for us to be sure that, yes, we are mobilizing citizens to demand responsive and accountable government. So that's a way to look at it. Then you can also go forward and still say that who collects or who leads collection. So maybe it's the M&E officer, you put it there. So you can go on and on. And you think about it this way, I've just almost closed up the outcome statements, the outcome results of this project. So let me put things into, let me add a little bit of, this is an outcome. If you look at it this way, because your outcome is related to your objectives. Yes, they are related. What you have as your objective normally will be your outcome. Don't forget, and that's the reason why I put all this here. So there is outcome, there is output statement, there is your activities, you have your inputs, and I'm going to quickly explain this and then pause. Of course, note that you already have your activities, and let me delete this and bring all this. Control C, I'll put it here. Activities, each of those must have, and I'm going to delete this. Then bring my M&E plan as a table. As an M&E officer, I'm sorry to say spreadsheets are your friend. We love tables a whole lot. And I'll put it here, Control V, and delete this so it's not looking messy. Of course, don't think it's only the M&E officer that finishes an M&E plan. You have your team members who will still proofread and still go through all this. What I'm going to do now, let me see. Wrap this. You need for each of these, for each of the activities, you need an indicator. And of course, you talk about activity level indicator, which measures the number of things you have done, which measures number of trainings that you have done. So that forms your activity level. Inputs are things you design to facilitate the project. For example, if you are going to be doing training, maybe you're developing toolkits, they form part of your inputs. So you need to put it under inputs as well, and also measure it along that line. Then you have your, I'm going to put this as a wrap again also. Then you have your outputs. Your outputs are the immediate results from your activities. So if you have educated activists, what is the reach of those? How many people, how many activists are supposed to participate in that your program? What are the things they would have access to? So, for example, the toolkits, how many of them are going to have access to it if you're providing toolkits for them? If it's a local government official, many of them are going to have access to that. That forms your output statements. Then you can think about what are the indicators for that. Then from your outputs, you then have your outcome statements. Outcome statements, like I said, they are like midterm results of your program, especially from your outputs. So if you have trained government officials to be able to respond to citizens, especially maybe on FOI requests, your output becomes the number of those that you have trained. Now, the number of government officials you have trained is not the result you're looking for. So now, at the outcome level is what those people you have trained are done in terms of their change in behavior. For example, their response to citizens' requests via the FOI. That is the outcome. Outcome measures the change in behavior of your participants. And we also always say that they are always out of your own reach. You might not be, they are not things you can quickly be able to measure. Even though some people do outcome harvesting and maybe in 6 months, in 7 months, they started seeing those changes. So on this note, I would like to pause at this moment. Like I said, I have discussed what is included in an M&E plan. These are things you need to know. This becomes my header, of course, and you can see the way I started. You have a project title, objective. These are project management side of things, where you have your project, you have the goal, you have the objective, you have the activities. It is from there an M&E officer then takes and cook whatever he wants to cook as an M&E plan.